Imagine a land where history, faith, and culture intertwine in ways few outside its borders have ever truly understood. Ethiopia, a nation perched in the Horn of Africa, is not only renowned for its breathtaking landscapes and ancient civilizations, but also for being one of the very first countries in the world to embrace Christianity. From the 1st to the 4th century AD, Ethiopia's leaders and communities welcomed the teachings of Christ, laying the foundation for a spiritual tradition that has endured for nearly 2 millennia. At the heart of this unique Christian heritage lies the Ethiopian Bible, written in the ancient Semitic language of Ge'ez. Unlike other versions of the Bible familiar to much of the world, this sacred text contains not only the traditional Old and New Testaments but also extraordinary works such as the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah. These texts offer profound insights into the spiritual beliefs, historical narratives, and moral philosophies of early Ethiopian Christians. They illuminate a connection to the ancient Hebrews, the early development of African Christianity, and a lineage of faith that is entirely distinctive in the Christian world. The Ethiopian Bible is more than a religious document. It is a living testament to the resilience and identity of a people. Each page, carefully preserved and painstakingly copied by generations of scribes and monks, tells a story not only of devotion to God but also of a civilization determined to protect its heritage. Through wars, foreign invasions, and cultural pressures, Ethiopians have safeguarded this sacred text, ensuring that its wisdom continues to inspire both scholars and believers alike. In exploring the Ethiopian Bible, one encounters narratives that are at once spiritual and historical. The Book of Enoch, for example, delves into the origins of angels and the Nephilim, offering a vision of the cosmos and divine judgment that is both mysterious and enlightening. The Book of Jubilees recounts biblical history with a unique emphasis on law, ritual, and the rhythms of sacred time, while the Ascension of Isaiah presents prophetic visions that challenge and expand our understanding of the heavens, angels, and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. These works, preserved within Ethiopia's religious tradition, offer perspectives that are largely absent from mainstream Christian texts and provide a rich window into early African spirituality. As we begin this journey into Ethiopia's sacred history, it is essential to recognize not only the spiritual significance of the Bible but also its role as a cultural treasure. This is a story of faith intertwined with identity, of a nation that has endured centuries of external pressure yet remained steadfast in preserving its spiritual and historical legacy. If you are passionate about uncovering hidden histories, exploring unique spiritual traditions, and witnessing the resilience of cultures that have shaped our world, make sure to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing these fascinating stories to light and ensures that the voices of history are heard and celebrated. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the mysteries, challenges, and triumphs surrounding the Ethiopian Bible, a text that has shaped the heart of a nation and continues to inspire awe around the world. As the centuries unfolded, Ethiopia, with its ancient Christian tradition and the sacred Ge'ez Bible at its heart, found itself increasingly in the gaze of European powers whose ambitions stretched far beyond trade and diplomacy. The British, Portuguese, and Italians arrived on Ethiopian soil, bringing not only their ships, technologies, and ideas but also a fervent desire to reshape the spiritual life of the nation according to their own Western interpretations of Christianity. These foreign emissaries and missionaries carried with them versions of the Bible, the King James, and the Latin Vulgate that had long been established in Europe, and they viewed the Ethiopian Bible, with its unique texts and centuries-old traditions, as a relic to be corrected, suppressed, or replaced. To them, the indigenous scriptures represented a challenge to the authority of European theology and a reminder that Ethiopia's faith had grown independently, rich with teachings and prophecies unfamiliar to Western eyes. The arrival of missionaries was not merely a religious gesture. It was a strategic effort intertwined with imperial ambition. Portuguese envoys, under the guise of fostering alliances and introducing new technologies, sought to bring Ethiopia into the orbit of Roman Catholicism, subtly undermining the Orthodox Church that had flourished for generations. They argued that the ancient texts, such as the Book of Enoch and the Ascension of Isaiah, contained heretical elements and were incompatible with the established canon of European Christianity. Yet, their criticisms often revealed more about their fear of the knowledge and authority preserved within Ethiopia's sacred writings than about any genuine doctrinal concern. These missionaries understood that the Ethiopian Bible was not merely a spiritual guide. It was a vessel of identity, a testament to the independence of Ethiopian Christianity, and a symbol of a people who had nurtured their faith on their own terms for centuries. The European presence introduced a subtle but persistent pressure on Ethiopian leaders, challenging their cultural sovereignty. Some emperors, while maintaining a strong personal faith, faced the delicate task of balancing resistance with the pragmatic realities of engaging with technologically advanced outsiders. Military conflicts and the introduction of European firearms further complicated the political landscape, adding an element of coercion to what was already a battle over the spiritual heart of the nation. The insistence on replacing the Ethiopian Bible with foreign versions was more than a religious intervention. It was a statement of control, a way to assert that European powers could define the moral and spiritual direction of a nation whose traditions had long stood independent of Western influence. Despite this immense pressure, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church remained a steadfast guardian of its texts and traditions. Monks and scribes, aware of the stakes, continued to copy the sacred manuscripts by hand, sometimes concealing them within monasteries or even in secret repositories far from the eyes of European visitors. These acts of preservation were quiet yet profound forms of resistance, demonstrating that the true power of a text lies not only in its words but also in the commitment of those who protect and revere it. Families would hide scrolls in their homes, and local communities continued rituals that relied on the ancient scriptures, ensuring that the teachings and prophecies that had guided Ethiopian Christians for centuries remained alive and accessible despite foreign efforts to suppress them. The suppression of the Ethiopian Bible was often justified by missionaries with claims of heresy or doctrinal error. Yet their actions reveal a deeper motive: the desire to impose a worldview that minimized African contributions to religious history and erased independent traditions that did not align with Western expectations. The unique blend of Christian and Jewish elements within the Ethiopian Bible, including stories connected to the Solomonic dynasty and the lineage of King Solomon, stood as a vivid reminder that African societies had cultivated sophisticated spiritual narratives long before European intervention. By challenging these texts, foreign powers sought not only to convert a population, but also to rewrite the narrative of the past, replacing Ethiopia's rich theological heritage with a version of Christianity that served imperial interests. This struggle between preservation and suppression was not an abstract conflict, but one that touched every layer of Ethiopian society. Schools, monasteries, and churches became arenas where the influence of European missionaries collided with centuries of established practice. The arrival of the King James and Latin Vulgate Bibles introduced new linguistic and theological frameworks, often incompatible with the nuances of the Ge'ez language and the interpretive traditions that had been cultivated over generations. Translating these foreign texts into Amharic or other vernacular languages sometimes required omitting passages deemed non-conforming, a process that further diluted the integrity of the original scriptures and highlighted the profound cultural gap between European expectations and Ethiopian reality. Through all these pressures, Ethiopia's commitment to its own spiritual path never wavered, even as missionaries established schools, hospitals, and churches in the 19th century. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church continued to assert its authority, ensuring that the Ethiopian Bible and the sacred texts it contained remained central to the nation's religious life. The presence of foreign powers, rather than extinguishing Ethiopia's traditions, ultimately underscored their resilience, as communities clung to the knowledge, rituals, and teachings that defined their identity. In preserving the Ethiopian Bible, Ethiopians were safeguarding more than a book. They were defending a worldview, a history, and a cultural legacy that had survived for centuries and that no external force could fully erase. Thus, the encounter between European powers, missionaries, and Ethiopia was not a simple tale of conversion or conquest. It was a story of clash and endurance, of foreign ambition meeting steadfast devotion, and of a people determined to protect the sacred inheritance that connected them to their past and to their own understanding of the divine. The attempts to impose Western Christianity and suppress the Ethiopian Bible, while momentarily influential, ultimately illuminated the strength of a tradition that had been nurtured, defended, and cherished across the generations, proving that faith deeply rooted in history and identity cannot be easily displaced. Ethiopia's long and storied history of faith and resilience is inseparable from the lives of the emperors who sought to defend it. And among the most notable of these were Tewodros I and Menelik I, leaders whose reigns were defined by a steadfast commitment to the spiritual and cultural integrity of their nation. Tewodros I ascended to the throne in a time of internal division and external threats, a period when European powers were increasingly assertive in Africa, eager to extend their influence through both diplomacy and force. Unlike many rulers who might have yielded to foreign pressure, Tewodros I recognized the symbolic and practical power of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the Ethiopian Bible, understanding that these were not merely religious texts, but the very bedrock of national identity and sovereignty. His resistance to European missionaries and colonial emissaries was both political and spiritual, a deliberate effort to safeguard Ethiopia's independence and the unbroken lineage of its religious traditions. Yet, Tewodros' determination placed him on a collision course with forces far beyond the reach of Ethiopia's borders, and the arrival of modern weaponry, coupled with the strategic ambitions of Britain and other powers, created an environment in which even the most courageous ruler faced immense challenges. The story of Tewodros I is marked by both valor and tragedy, as foreign envoys arrived, bringing with them demands to adopt Western interpretations of Christianity and to suppress the ancient scriptures. Tewodros' responses were calculated acts of defiance designed to preserve Ethiopia's spiritual sovereignty. He understood that the Ethiopian Bible, with its inclusion of texts such as the Book of Enoch and the Ascension of Isaiah, represented not only theological depth but also a connection to centuries of Ethiopian history, a lineage that intertwined with stories of the Solomonic dynasty and the enduring faith of a people whose civilization had never been colonized. Yet, the external pressures were relentless. Military confrontations escalated, culminating in the tragic events at Magdala, where Tewodros faced the superior firepower of British forces, even as the city fell and the emperor ultimately chose death over surrender. His legacy endured in the unbroken devotion of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the continued reverence for the Ethiopian Bible, a testament to a nation's unwavering spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. Following Tewodros I, the reign of Menelik I similarly illustrates the delicate balance between resistance and pragmatic accommodation. Menelik inherited a nation that was deeply proud of its independence, but increasingly aware of the technological and political might of European powers. Unlike Tewodros, who confronted foreign forces with uncompromising resolve, Menelik's approach combined strategic diplomacy with selective adaptation, allowing him to navigate the pressures of missionaries and colonial agents while still asserting the autonomy of Ethiopia's religious and cultural institutions. even as schools, hospitals, and churches sponsored by foreign missionaries were established. Menelik maintained the authority of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the continued use of the Ethiopian Bible in traditional contexts. Understanding that the preservation of Ethiopia's spiritual heritage required both vigilance and careful negotiation. The tension between Ethiopian rulers and foreign powers was not merely a battle of armies or diplomacy. It was a struggle for the heart and soul of the nation. The Ethiopian Bible stood at the center of this struggle. Its suppression representing more than a theological dispute, it was an attempt to reshape the cultural and historical identity of Ethiopia. European powers, armed with both ideology and advanced weaponry, sought to impose Western Christianity and erase the unique elements of Ethiopia's spiritual tradition. Missionaries argued that the Ethiopian texts were heretical, but the deeper motive lay in controlling the narrative, redefining the past, and weakening the cultural cohesion that the Ethiopian Bible embodied. Against this backdrop, the emperor's resistance, whether through direct confrontation or strategic diplomacy, highlights the interplay between leadership, faith, and national identity, showing how spiritual texts can become symbols of independence and resilience in the face of external domination. Despite periods of partial submission to foreign influence, the Ethiopian emperor's determination ensured that the core of the nation's spiritual life remained intact. The Ethiopian Bible continued to be copied, preserved, and studied within monasteries and private communities, shielded from the scrutiny of foreign agents and safeguarded by generations of Ethiopian faithful. These acts of preservation were not passive but deliberate, reflecting a profound understanding that the survival of a people's history, culture, and identity is inseparable from the preservation of its sacred texts. Through wars, political pressures, and the subtle coercion of foreign missionaries, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, supported by the vision and authority of its emperors, maintained a continuity of faith that withstood attempts at suppression, ensuring that the voices and stories contained within the Ethiopian Bible would endure. Moreover, the emperor's engagement with foreign powers demonstrates the nuanced strategies required to protect cultural heritage under pressure. While Tewodros's defiance exemplified the courage to resist with uncompromising strength, Menelik's measured diplomacy illustrates that preservation sometimes requires navigating complex political realities, finding ways to incorporate necessary advancements without surrendering foundational traditions. In Boses, the protection of the Ethiopian Bible was inseparable from the assertion of national sovereignty, showing that spiritual texts are not merely religious instruments but pivotal anchors of identity, memory, and collective resilience. Ultimately, the struggles of Tewodros I and Menelik I against foreign influence underscore a central truth in Ethiopia's history: that faith, culture, and leadership are intertwined, and that the preservation of a sacred text like the Ethiopian Bible can define the destiny of a nation. Through their courage, wisdom, and determination, these emperors ensured that the Ethiopian Bible survived the incursions of European powers, remaining a living testament to the spiritual, cultural, and historical identity of a nation that refused to yield its heritage, even in the face of overwhelming pressure and profound external challenges. As Ethiopia navigated the turbulent currents of the 19th and early 20th centuries, the nation's spiritual heart, the Ethiopian Bible, faced challenges far beyond theological debates. The text that had guided generations of Ethiopian Christians, preserving a unique blend of Old Testament, New Testament, and apocryphal works, suddenly became targets of foreign scrutiny and control. European powers, driven by a combination of religious zeal, political ambition, and a desire to assert cultural dominance, viewed these sacred books not merely as scriptures, but as obstacles to their broader objectives. Missionaries, armed with the authority of their churches and the backing of imperial governments, deemed certain texts heretical, insisting that they were incompatible with the interpretations of Christianity prevalent in Europe. These were not idle claims. They were deliberate attempts to delegitimize an entire tradition and to place Ethiopia's spiritual life under the influence of Western thought, subtly undermining centuries of independent theological development. The scope of this suppression was extensive. Books that had long been central to Ethiopian worship and study, such as the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah, along with Tobit, Judith, Baruch, Wisdom, Ecclesiasticus, and the histories of the Maccabees, were singled out for exclusion and condemnation. To European eyes, these texts challenged the established canon, containing narratives, prophecies, and teachings that were unfamiliar, sometimes even unsettling, because they revealed a lineage of spiritual insight and historical consciousness that did not originate in Europe, for the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and its faithful. However, these books were indispensable. They were more than spiritual guides. They were threads in the rich tapestry of national identity, connecting the people to their ancestors, to the Solomonic dynasty, and to the enduring story of Ethiopia as a cradle of Christianity. The act of banning these books, therefore, was not just a religious imposition. It was an attempt to sever a culture from its history, to diminish the authority of local traditions, and to reframe the narrative of Africa itself according to European priorities. Resistance to this imposition was both courageous and creative. Ethiopian clerics, monks, and devout families took extraordinary measures to preserve their sacred texts. Scrolls and manuscripts were hidden in monasteries, passed from hand to hand, and carefully copied to ensure that knowledge would not be lost. Communities organized clandestine study sessions, continuing rituals and liturgical readings despite the threat of fines, imprisonment, or other forms of coercion. Each act of preservation became a statement of defiance, a quiet but powerful reminder that the essence of a nation could not be legislated away or erased by foreign decree. Even as colonial powers sought to enforce the dominance of the King James Version or the Latin Vulgate, Ethiopians persisted in maintaining their own spiritual heritage, underscoring the profound connection between sacred text and cultural identity. The banning of these books carried consequences that reached far beyond the walls of churches and monasteries. By restricting possession and declaring texts heretical, European powers attempted to control not only what Ethiopians read but also how they interpreted their faith, effectively shaping the moral and historical consciousness of future generations. This intervention aimed to impose a single, standardized vision of Christianity, one that mirrored Western sensibilities and marginalized alternative perspectives, including those emerging from Africa itself. The Ethiopian Bible, with its centuries of accumulated wisdom and historical insight, represented a challenge to this narrative, reminding Europeans that the roots of Christian thought and practice were not solely confined to Europe but were deeply entwined with African experiences, history, and identity. In understanding the implications of these bans, it becomes clear that the struggle over the Ethiopian Bible was as much about power and narrative control as it was about theology. By limiting access to these texts, colonial authorities sought to rewrite the story of Ethiopia and, by extension, to diminish the significance of African contributions to religious and historical knowledge. Yet, the response from Ethiopia was neither passive nor compliant. The people's attachment to their sacred books, reinforced by the leadership of committed church figures and the support of emperors, transformed the act of reading, copying, and teaching the GS Bible into a form of cultural and spiritual resistance. Each preserved manuscript, each whispered teaching in a hidden monastery, became a testament to the enduring vitality of a tradition that colonial powers could not extinguish, no matter the scope of their influence or the sophistication of their interventions. The tension between suppression and preservation also highlights the deep interplay between religion and identity in Ethiopia. The texts targeted by European powers were not arbitrary. They contained historical accounts, ethical reflections, and spiritual prophecies that affirmed Ethiopia's connection to its past and to the broader narrative of humanity. The Book of Enoch, for example, offered insights into angelic orders, moral responsibility, and cosmic events, while the Book of Jubilees emphasized ritual observance and the continuity of divine law. By attempting to ban these works, European authorities inadvertently revealed the power of knowledge that lay beyond their control, the kind of knowledge that strengthens communities, preserves memory, and asserts independence even under external pressure. Ultimately, the banning of the Ethiopian Bible's key texts was a confrontation between two visions of history and faith, one imposed from abroad, seeking uniformity and control, and one emerging organically from a people's own spiritual and cultural development, resilient and self-aware. While European powers could restrict, condemn, and intimidate, they could not erase the profound connection between Ethiopians and their sacred writings. The Bible survived, hidden in plain sight, carried forward by those who understood that preserving one's history, identity, and faith is inseparable from the act of safeguarding the texts that articulate it. Through this struggle, the Ethiopian Bible stands today not only as a religious treasure but as a symbol of defiance, continuity, and the unbroken spirit of a nation determined to maintain its own story against forces that sought to rewrite it. The Ethiopian Bible stands as a remarkable testament to the convergence of faith, history, and culture, encapsulating a rich tapestry of traditions that stretch across centuries and continents, making it one of the most unique religious texts in the world. Unlike many other versions of the Christian Bible, the Bible intertwines Christian doctrines with Jewish heritage, preserving narratives and laws that reflect the deep historical connections Ethiopia maintained with the ancient Israelites, including the celebrated lineage of the Solomonic dynasty. This convergence of spiritual traditions is not merely theological. It represents a profound historical memory, linking the Ethiopian people to legendary figures such as King Solomon and Queen Sheba, whose encounters, according to tradition, shaped the destiny of the nation and whose lineage continues to be honored in Ethiopian culture. The stories contained within these texts, particularly the extra-canonical books such as the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah, are imbued with layers of historical, ethical, and spiritual insight, providing guidance not only on religious matters but also on the governance, moral philosophy, and identity of a people whose civilization has endured for millennia. From its earliest days, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church embraced these texts as central to worship, study, and communal life, ensuring that each generation could access the profound wisdom and spiritual vision embedded in them. The inclusion of Jewish traditions alongside Christian teachings creates a dynamic religious narrative that is distinctly Ethiopian, reflecting the nation's openness to diverse spiritual influences while simultaneously asserting a singular, culturally rooted identity. Unlike many European interpretations of Christianity, which often sought to streamline doctrine and canon for the sake of uniformity, the Ethiopian Bible retained a breadth and depth of material that spoke to the lived experiences of its people, to their understanding of justice, the divine order, and the intricate relationship between humanity and the Creator. Each book, whether canonical or apocryphal, serves as a bridge between the past and the present, a vessel through which Ethiopians can trace their spiritual lineage back to the earliest encounters between African civilizations and the Abrahamic faiths, affirming that Ethiopia's contribution to religious history is both ancient and profound. The historical and cultural significance of the Ethiopian Bible cannot be separated from the nation's enduring resistance to external pressures aimed at undermining its spiritual sovereignty. European powers, motivated by a combination of imperial ambition and religious zeal, repeatedly sought to impose Western interpretations of Christianity, promoting the King James Version or the Latin Vulgate while dismissing the Ethiopian texts as heretical or outdated. This suppression was not merely an act of religious enforcement. It was a calculated attempt to erase African cultural identity and control the narrative of Christianity in the continent. By undermining the legitimacy of the GS Bible, foreign powers hoped to weaken the connection between Ethiopians and their own history, severing the threads that tied the nation to the Solomonic dynasty, to the stories of Queen Sheba, and to centuries of theological scholarship and cultural development that were uniquely Ethiopian. Yet despite these pressures, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church and the faithful remained steadfast, preserving manuscripts, continuing liturgical practices, and ensuring that the spiritual and cultural heart of the nation remained intact. The GS Bible's preservation of African heritage is particularly evident in the ways it documents Ethiopia's religious and political history, chronicling the establishment of the Aksumite Empire, the spread of Christianity throughout the region, and the integration of Judaic principles within Ethiopian religious life. Through its pages, one can trace the story of a people whose identity has been shaped by resilience, faith, and an intimate understanding of the sacred, linking religious observance to cultural pride and communal cohesion. The text's unique combination of Christian and Jewish elements allows Ethiopians to see themselves not only as part of a global religious tradition, but also as custodians of a distinct historical narrative that affirms their place in the broader story of human civilization. The Bible becomes, in this sense, both a spiritual guide and a cultural archive. Preserving languages, liturgical forms, moral codes, and historical accounts that would have been lost or distorted under the pressures of colonial influence. Central to the Ethiopian Bible's role in shaping identity is its reflection of the Solomonic dynasty, whose claimed descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba positions Ethiopia within a sacred historical lineage that intertwines divine providence, governance, and national destiny. This lineage is more than a symbolic connection. It is an assertion of Ethiopia's sovereignty and spiritual authority, a reminder that the nation's history predates colonial encounters and external pressures. By maintaining these texts, Ethiopians uphold a continuous narrative of their own making, one in which cultural heritage, religious belief, and political history are inseparable. The inclusion of apocryphal works such as the Book of Enoch, with its detailed cosmology and moral instruction, or the Book of Jubilees, emphasizing divine law and ritual observance, provides an additional layer of connection to a long and unbroken tradition of African theological thought. Moreover, the Ethiopian Bible's survival and continued reverence serve as a powerful testament to the resilience of a people who refuse to allow foreign domination to erase their spiritual and cultural identity. Generations of scholars, monks, and laypeople painstakingly preserved manuscripts, ensured accurate transmission of liturgical practices, and resisted external pressures that sought to impose foreign narratives. Through this dedication, the GS Bible has remained a living text, continually read, studied, and honored, sustaining Ethiopia's unique blend of Christian and Jewish heritage and reinforcing the profound connection between faith and identity. It is within this context that the Ethiopian Bible emerges not merely as a religious artifact, but as a symbol of national endurance, cultural continuity, and the unyielding spirit of a people who have safeguarded their history and beliefs against the forces of suppression. In essence, the Ethiopian Bible embodies a multidimensional legacy. It is a sacred scripture, a historical record, and a cultural manifesto that affirms the unique identity of Ethiopia within the African continent and the broader world. Its pages capture the intertwined narratives of faith, heritage, and resilience, offering Ethiopians and scholars alike a window into a civilization that has shaped, and been shaped, centuries of spiritual and cultural endeavor. Through the preservation and reverence of this remarkable text, Ethiopia asserts that its history, faith, and identity cannot be rewritten or silenced, affirming the enduring power of the GES Bible as a central pillar of national and spiritual life, a living bridge between past and present, and a profound testament to the richness of African heritage. As the centuries unfolded, the Ethiopian Bible, also known as the GES Bible, endured trials that would have overwhelmed lesser traditions, yet it emerged as a symbol of resilience, cultural pride, and spiritual continuity, despite facing repeated attempts at suppression by foreign powers, including European missionaries and colonial authorities who sought to replace it with the King James Version or the Latin Vulgate. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church refused to let this sacred text vanish into obscurity. Across generations, monks, scribes, and devoted communities risked imprisonment, social ostracism, and even violence to safeguard these manuscripts, hiding them in monasteries tucked into mountainsides, copying them by hand, and passing them from one generation to the next with unwavering devotion. Every hidden scroll, every secret reading session, became an act of quiet resistance, a statement that the identity of a people and the integrity of their spiritual heritage could not be dictated from afar or rewritten by those who did not share their history. The survival of the Ethiopian Bible speaks not only to religious devotion, but also to the unbreakable bond between cultural memory and spiritual practice. Within its pages, Ethiopians could trace the narrative of their civilization, from the storied reign of the Solomonic dynasty and the legendary union of King Solomon and Queen Sheba to the earliest adopters of Christianity in Africa. Texts like the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and the Ascension of Isaiah, though deemed heretical by European authorities, preserved profound insights into morality, cosmic order, prophecy, and the divine connection between humanity and the Creator. The Bible acted as a living archive, encoding centuries of African history, ethical philosophy, and religious interpretation in a form that was distinctly Ethiopian, yet universally human. By maintaining these traditions, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church ensured that their people could access a spiritual and historical compass that no external force could dismantle. In the modern era, renewed interest in the Ethiopian Bible has illuminated its significance on a global scale. Scholars, historians, and religious researchers have begun to explore the manuscripts that were once hidden from public view, uncovering the richness of Ethiopian theology, the depth of its Jewish-Christian synthesis, and the intricate ways in which faith and culture intertwine. Translations and studies have brought awareness to the Bible's unique structure, its inclusion of 81 books that extend far beyond the standard 66 of the Western canon, and the remarkable continuity of its textual tradition despite centuries of external pressure. Today, the Ethiopian Bible is recognized not merely as a religious artifact, but as a vital window into the spiritual, cultural, and intellectual life of one of Africa's oldest civilizations. It demonstrates how communities can sustain their identity and heritage even under sustained efforts to suppress them, offering lessons about the power of perseverance, faith, and cultural self-determination. What makes the Ethiopian Bible especially compelling is the way it embodies a living heritage. Unlike texts preserved solely for academic interest, The Ethiopian Bible continues to guide the spiritual lives of millions of Ethiopians. It informs liturgical practice, ethical reflection, and community identity. Through its stories, Ethiopians connect to their ancestors, understand their place in history, and assert the validity and richness of their own cultural and spiritual worldview. The very act of preserving and using the Ethiopian Bible has always been more than a matter of religious ritual. It is a declaration that the Ethiopian people are the custodians of their own history, and that their voice, culture, and spiritual insight matter in the global narrative. This enduring relevance of the Ethiopian Bible serves as a reminder of the broader importance of preserving indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage. Throughout history, powers seeking to dominate or colonize often attempted to erase the histories, languages, and sacred texts of the people they sought to control. The Ethiopian example illustrates that such efforts, while they may temporarily obscure or restrict, cannot extinguish the deep-rooted connection between a people and their traditions. By safeguarding the Ethiopian Bible, Ethiopians have preserved a rich reservoir of history, faith, and identity that continues to inspire not only their own nation but also scholars, historians, and spiritual seekers worldwide. The Bible's survival underscores the capacity of human communities to maintain continuity, memory, and meaning, even when faced with external pressures that aim to rewrite or suppress them. As we reflect on the legacy of the Ethiopian Bible, we see a narrative that extends beyond the pages of Scripture into the very essence of human resilience. It is a story of a nation that refused to allow its heritage to be erased, a community that protected its sacred texts with courage and care, and a culture that nurtured its spiritual identity in the face of profound challenges. The renewed global interest in these texts today is a testament to the timeless wisdom and enduring relevance of the Ethiopian Bible, inviting all of us to learn from its lessons of perseverance, faith, and respect for cultural heritage. If this journey through history and faith has opened your eyes to the remarkable story of the Ethiopian Bible, I encourage you to continue exploring and sharing its lessons. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss a story that illuminates hidden histories and remarkable legacies. Your support helps ensure that these narratives, which celebrate resilience, cultural identity, and spiritual insight, continue to reach audiences around the world. Inspiring reflection, understanding, and appreciation for the profound stories that have shaped human history. Thank you for joining this exploration, and may the enduring spirit of the Ethiopian Bible inspire you as it has inspired generations before.